I'm still muted. Hey, there we go. Welcome back to Dev Intersection. This is Virtual Dev Intersection. I'm here with, he's on that side, with Richard Campbell. There you go.
Hi, man.
How's it going?
Good.
And our guest, check it out, Billy Hollis.
The Billy Hollis.
The Billy Hollis. How's it going, Billy? Why don't you give folks a quick intro in case they don't know who you are?
Well, first of all, I'm not the Billy Hollis because there are lots of Billy Hollises. I get their email on Gmail all the time. Because I have Billy Hollis at Gmail, and I have Billy Hollis on Skype, and I have Billy Hollis on Twitter. So I'm all the time being mistaken for other Billy Hollises. But for the folks that haven't heard me talk at some point, I'm a longtime developer. I started writing code for money about 40 years ago, and then moved into more user experience design aspects of the business perhaps 10 years ago. I still do some coding, but I do also about 70% of my time on UX design. I lead a team of consultants here in Nashville. We do some pretty leading edge software, mostly native, but maybe 20-25% web as well. Pretty much have to do some web software with most applications these days. And I speak a lot at conferences, and I write books, and I write magazine articles. And my most recent effort was a LinkedIn learning course.
Really?
My very first one for them called UX Design for Developers. Nice. And I'll talk about that a little bit more as we go through the day.
Is that what I'm seeing there on your screen? Do we want to show that real quick?
Yeah, you can show that right now if you want to.
Yeah, there we go.
It was put out in January, and it's garnering a fair number of viewers. I've gotten some really nice emails around it. The basic idea that is in 2 hours, I'm going to try to introduce somebody to the most important concepts that a typical developer would need to know to get started in UX design. And I've got some examples that I'll show a little bit later. It's also good, by the way, for managers and business analysts and people like that. Anybody that is involved in the software development process that feels just really out of their depth when they do UX design, this would be a pretty good 2-hour investment, I think, to talk a lot more knowledgeably about it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Not to bump up Billy's resume further, but he is part of the origin story of .NET Rocks.
Oh, do tell. Here we go.
When Carl talks about his inspiration for starting .NET Rocks, right? And he started. I didn't come on board until 2005.
Mm-hmm.
It was watching Billy and Rocky Lotka argue about the pre-release of .NET at I believe a VS Live concert, or it might even be a VBits conference.
VBits, all right, right there, VBits.
Yeah, that's some old school stuff, dude.
Oh yeah.
And you thought other people might actually want to hear that kind of nonsense?
Oh,
that was Carl's thought, was like those discussions, and I've had this experience, in those speakers lounges, you have these amazing conversations sometimes. Sometimes they're all fart jokes too, but once in a while, you get a really serious debate going on about a technology. And it was Carl's inspiration to say, well, we need to capture this and share it with more people. And that's sort of the beginning of all of that.
And it still amazes me after 16, 18 times I've been on the show. People still tune in and they still listen to that podcast. I'm amazed. So maybe a few people will listen like this one too.
Well, if you want to have some fun, you go pull all the Billy Hollis .NET Rocks episodes, and you can watch the transformation of Billy Hollis. Once upon a time, he was just this serious coder and like, how do you make production software?
Yeah.
But I remember in our chain of conversations over more than a decade now, just bit by bit, your interest and focus in design. Remember you getting serious about photography, and just these are the things that started mattering to you, and it certainly changed the way you talk. I believe it changed the way you think, but clearly your customers love it. You're only building software.
It absolutely changed the way I think. I went to my closet one day a few years into that process and took out every garment that I had, every T-shirt, every speaker shirt with a logo.
Yeah,
right.
I took them all and sent them to Goodwill. There was something in my brain that said, I can't wear those shirts anymore.
I have a wife for that. And I have to admit that I have seen a couple of the homeless folks around my town wearing deckhead shirts. So
yes.
What are you going to do?
There's something funny about the idea of a homeless guy wearing a TechEd speaker shirt. That's always funny.
It's a thing.
I felt terrible that I worked how long? I worked so hard to finally get to speak at TechEd, and they changed the color of the shirt for the last TechEd. I'm like, I wanted that green shirt, but instead I got this purple one. I'm like,
yeah.
That's okay. You missed the bowling shirts from a few years before that.
Right.
That
The flammable
nobody.
bowling shirts
Yeah.
too. Like
Yeah.
you did not want to be near an open flame with that shirt. You'd be an instant torch.
Oh my gosh. And then they gave us, they didn't even give us shirts for Ignite. It was like, all right.
I almost think that whole thing is passé now. Conferences are starting to evolve too. And I think they're, part of your own way of representing yourself to an audience now is a particular aesthetic. We discuss making shirts for DEVintersection all the time. Like we've done it in the past. It's just today it feels like that's not the way anymore.
Yeah.
It comes back to come back to a little bit of Billy's topic, that personal branding, that unique way that you represent yourself and that folks interact with you changes if you're in a uniform. If you have that standard look that everybody has the same shirt, then nobody's unique.
Yeah.
Well, it makes me feel like we're anonymizing the speaker, and I think that's very unfair.
Sure.
Yeah. And I've
Speakers are
seen
special.
I've seen it change in the 20 years I've been speaking. It used to be it was all about the conference and the content, but I saw an evolution where people do come for speakers now much more. I guess as some of us had an opportunity to build our reputation and our brand. But if you doubt that standing out from somebody is beneficial, all you got to do is look at Scott Guthrie, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, people can spot him from across the room with that red shirt.
I'm sorry. Who was that again? Oh, him. Yeah.
And I don't know if I should tell this story, Richard, but he lost his luggage.
Yeah.
At one of his European speaking engagements. We were talking about this at NDC Oslo several years back. He had to go out and try to find a red golf shirt somewhere in Europe, and he told the story about how he finally, because he doesn't like to go on stage without one. That's his brand.
It's become a brand.
Yeah.
It was an accidental brand. He didn't set out to do that.
It just sort of happened. Yeah. But I mean, well, I didn't exactly plan this hair either. My brand, and I did say something that I shouldn't have said. I was at that time I was a little into some of my earlier illnesses and kind of short-tempered. And so when he said that, I snapped off something without thinking. I said, Scott, if your brand were your hair, you wouldn't have this problem. And that was probably not a very good thing to say, but.
Maybe not a kind thing anyway.
Yeah.
I've gone right after the logoed baseball hat that has whatever product, whatever feature it is that I'm representing. Now I've got folks asking me for that C# hat that I wear. Like,
nice.
That's a thing. Oh my gosh. So I made one more hat like that. There's only 2 of them in existence. I wear one, and I gave one to Scott Hunter. I was like, if you're going to give one to someone, give it to either the boss or the guy who invented it.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to reconcile that this week. And so I gave one to Scott, and folks say that they see him wearing it around campus. He's worn it on a couple of videos, and now people are like, if Scott's got one, I've got to get one now.
Got to get one of those.
All the cool kids have one.
You should go on. You should figure out a way to get them made and sell them on Amazon. You know who David Neal is?
Oh, yes.
Sure. Yeah, the Reverend.
He sells T-shirts on Amazon. I think one of his best-selling ones says employees must wash hands after using JavaScript, and he sells a lot of those shirts. So there's a business opportunity for you, Jeff.
I've got a couple friends here in the Twitch creative community that want to work with me who do embroidery. They actually do embroidery live on Twitch, so folks can watch and learn how they do these things. They want to work with me to put together a hat with a logo on it. I've got some other folks that I'm working with who want to do some other things with some of the brands, some of the emotes that we use here. And make it interesting. Make things available for folks that want to get some swag or something. So, it's part of that. I
totally agree. I feel like it's something we didn't do at .NET Rocks, but maybe we should have. Back in the day, I've actually seen folks that have made .NET Rocks phrase T-shirts like "golf clap for you, sir." That's like, geez, I should have probably made that shirt.
Yeah, that could have been a thing.
Could have been a thing.
So. Audio, video, when we're presenting and putting together a show like this, gosh, it took me, a couple hours to build some of the things that we're going to see here on the different sets, the different layouts throughout our discussion here. But when we're building an application, Billy, you've got a little bit more time to plan, and there's a lot more of a science to that, isn't there?
Well, I don't know if I'd call it science, but I certainly would call it a process.
Okay.
that, and I presume you're talking more about the design end of things. There's any number of people to talk about the code production aspects of things.
Sure.
And yeah, there is definitely a general process. I'm not dogmatic about process. I don't like to say you must do this and this and this and this and this, but the general flow is pretty similar between all the UX design processes that I do. And we've done some formalization for our own clients. And in that course, I talk about some of the exercises that we do, some of the steps, so that when we observe users, for example, well, I'll ask you, just let's get a level set here.
Sure.
If you're observing users to figure out how to write something, and I'm sure you've done that at one time or another in your career.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so what did you do with what you after you finished talking to these people? What did you do?
Went off on my engineers. No.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
So I had some notes put together. I had some. I took some screenshots of the places that they struggled, and I drew some red lines and things. And I took them back to my engineers and said, okay, this is the feedback. This is what we heard. Here's the ways, the things that they've suggested or where they expected to be able to interact with the software. And I'll give you a real good case that I'm sure folks that are out there that are watching have seen. Where I've impacted with user experience study, and that was the NuGet installation dialogue in Visual Studio. What you're seeing in Visual Studio 2017 and 2019 is the result of a study that my team did, and the feedback that we got, interacting with folks that were trying to use NuGet, install packages for .NET projects.
Yeah, well, that sounds above average, I would say, for most of what I see in terms of developers working with users, because there are any number of developers that I did a session on this at a conference a while back, and about 30 to 35% of the audience raised their hands when I asked who has not talked to users in the last year or two. That there are a lot of people who don't talk to them at all. But if they do the sort of things that you're talking about. I think you're a little bit more structured than most, I think. But we go into things like composing sentences that summarize the major observations that we saw. A sentence such as, the user doesn't know what this data field is for, or the user has trouble searching by phone number. Just fairly simple sentences. And if we do a structured user observation for a day or a day and a half, we'll get a couple of hundred of those. So I use a spreadsheet, and I have a technique for putting them in a spreadsheet, and the team analyzes every one of them, so that if somebody doesn't get why that the user said that, then whoever observed that user gets to communicate it to the whole team. So after about a 2-hour meeting, everybody has kind of shared all the information that all the people who observe users have brought to the table. And then since it's in a spreadsheet, we can sort it and do things to it. So we assign categories to those pieces of those observations. And then when we get ready to work on a particular piece of the app, we can go back and bring in just the parts of that were in that category and refresh ourselves with all the observations that we saw. And we do some of the things you talked about too, with screenshots and such, and highlighting things, because there are some really obvious mistakes sometimes that people make. It surprises me, the things that you find out. It's the old Yogi Berra thing. You can observe a lot just by watching.
Yes.
Do you have sort of tools that you lean on, Billy, for that? Like they sort of sketch up things? Like, how do you mock something that doesn't look like it's finished so that they expect you to ship it immediately?
I start with paper and pencil.
Weird.
Actually, and
who would do that?
Yeah, paper and pencil. Honestly, when I bring some developers into a team of design that we're going to work on, some of them have not physically picked up a pencil to do anything in years or decades. They just use pens.
You can't argue with the battery life of pencil.
And paper's cheap. And the install time for paper is astonishingly small. So,
yeah, and the resolution's great.
The resolution's excellent. So it's really tough to beat. And it feels weird at first, but most developers say, see, here's the thing. Here's the thing that I think a lot of people getting into UX design don't get. John Cleese said this in some of his videos. I talk about this in the LinkedIn course. He says that people who do creative stuff for a living and are considered to be highly creative people, their brains are not that different in terms of raw creative capability than any of us. What they're really good at is putting their mind in the state that allows them to create.
Right.
Well, it turns out that certain things your brain will learn. Your brain's very plastic. So after a while, if you use paper and pencil, it becomes a signal to your brain. Oh, I'm starting to do design now.
Yes.
And that part of your brain that wants to write code all the time gets quieted down a little bit, which is really helpful for design, because that analytical part of your brain is always wanting to look at every idea you come up with. It's going, here's all the things that are wrong with that idea. Oh gosh, it's going to take so long to implement. No, see, you want to put that part of your brain to sleep if you can while you're doing UX design. So I have various exercises to kind of help people do that, including relaxation exercises and listening exercises. So design requires a certain sort of linear flow, but how you do individual pieces varies a lot. The key part is that you get your brain in the right state of mind to be able to do it.
Okay. And I think you keyed on something there that I think a lot of technical folk don't do very well, and that's listening.
Yes.
They're quick to talk, quick to say, well, here's my opinion, but they're not ready. They're not, they don't have the discipline to back off and say, I need to listen for a second here because Billy's got something that's important that I need to hear. Richard's going to be talking about, and I need to make sure that I understand that and then take those notes. And we need to, as technical folks, be good listeners so we can make better educated decisions.
Well, it's not just a problem exclusive to developers.
Certainly.
Human beings in general, the studies say that human beings typically when they're even just in one-on-one interaction with someone, they do active listening and really paying attention for typically about 10 to 15 seconds at a stretch. And then their mind wanders. Now, with practice, you can get that up to a minute and a half or 2 minutes. There's actually a book with a really good, let's see if I can get a browser window up here. Let's get another window up. There's a book.
That's a lot of logos.
That's Opera, which I tend to use as my launch pad for browsing.
And then I'll transition over to you to your browser there when you get it.
Myth. Olivia Fox-Cabane.
Books? Who reads books?
Yeah. Anyway, you can transition over now so they can kind of see what the search is going to look like when it comes through there. So you're going to be doing something and see Olivia Fox-Cabane, and then you'll get this book right here.
There we go.
And as you can see, it's not very expensive. This woman teaches people, particularly executives of high-end companies and such, how to increase their presence and their charisma. She charges 6 figures to do that and takes on 4 or 5 people a year. But she very graciously wrote this nice book for only $13.60. And there's a chapter in here specifically on listening, about how you sort of exercise yourself to listen more attentively and actively. And you're right.
Is the argument that listening is charismatic?
For her argument, yes. That if people realize that you're listening to them, they will respond to you better. They will have a better opinion of you. And look, we've all experienced this. We're talking to somebody, and they hit that 15-second mark, and they're not listening anymore, and they put on this kind of mask. Yeah. and look, do you know that they're not listening anymore? Can you tell? I can tell. Sure. Well, do you think that they can't tell when you're doing that?
Yeah.
Obviously they can. So if you learn to listen carefully and actively, then people respond to you a lot better. It's just a great life skill.
Well, and you might actually learn something along the way, too. Although, do you find users actually understand UX well? Like, what do they talk about that you can translate into software design?
Well, typically what a user will do is to say something like, let's see if I can think of a really good example. Understand that most of the time when we go in, we're redesigning from scratch.
Sure.
So we're looking for places where they have trouble. So more than once, I've been in a situation where I'm observing a user and they're doing some common thing that they do all the time. And I have to skip around to 5 or 6 or 7 places to do it.
Right.
Well, that's an indicator that the interaction design is flawed.
Right.
That whoever
it's not
wrote,
a workflow.
Yeah, whoever wrote that software didn't really understand how those people do their jobs. Now, in many cases, it happens just because this stuff is just crammed on over time, that pieces are grafted onto the system without a lot of thought about how they fit into the other parts of the system. So that's certainly a possibility. But in many cases, it's just that the developers don't know any better. They don't know how to assemble the actions because they don't really know how the users do them. So once you do that, you start to understand what people are doing. Now you dive a little bit deeper, drill down on what they're trying to accomplish, set up a little bit about the workflows so you know what the steps are. And now when you design the new version, you make it very friendly to that flow. You make it kind of a hub, in many cases, a hub and spoke pattern, where the main thing that they do is right there with the most important pieces of information and the 2 or 3 most important actions. And for the edge cases, they can branch out to other parts of the application, but you want to minimize that. You want the 80 to 90% case that they're right there on that one screen doing things, and that they're not going more than 1 or maybe at most 2 levels deep away from that hub. If you do that, then you smooth out, streamline their interaction, you speed them up, they make fewer mistakes. And so that's the kind of thing that you learn during user observation that you translate then into design.
And I see in the comments here, Swift saying sometimes UX designers on a greenfield project dream up designs that cannot be executed with implementing technologies. And I'm gonna push on you on that, Billy. Is there much in the way of workflows you can't build?
We've never really found one that we couldn't find a way to do. It is certainly true that when you do greenfield, you have a lot more flexibility to just kind of throw away old stuff and start over. So I get that, and we do work probably 80, 90% in greenfield redesigns. But if you think about it, look, most of these applications that I see, and perhaps the majority in the field today, are designs from the 90s or early 2000s. We're way overdue in doing complete rework.
So you're replacing like the Battleship Gray file menu, your MDI interface style apps.
Yes, we're replacing them with completely new interaction patterns, and so we're really radically overhauling the app. Now you can still work with existing stuff and do smaller, more refined things. And in fact, part of my course, I kind of take that dichotomy into account, that the way you do design, when you're doing it with currently existing software, there tends to be tighter iterations, and the things that you're working on are things like data visualizations to make data look better. Yeah. And you can typically do that in situ. You can do that in place in an existing app.
Sure.
And without radically changing it. I've got an example here somewhere. Hang on. Let me just kind of show you. Sort of simple.
And I think while you're looking for your example, that as we see in the Windows space, right, going from Battleship Gray, which military always loves Battleship Gray, but as we move into Windows 10 and some of the things you can do with UWP, the innovations like the XAML data, the XAML islands, mean that we can start to bring into those older applications the new features and find a bridge into newer.
You can, and I see people just starting to do that, but that still requires some thought and some design for that piece. If you assign that piece to a developer who just drags controls onto the screen, you're not going to really take advantage of those modern app technologies very well. So let's see if I can start this. This was my original example, sort of for various things that I did for several different clients, because this has worked out very well. If you think about, we have a lot of time series data in our world, and it surprises me how rarely that data is effectively visualized to the user. I mean, normally people would just throw things like this. This is just kind of a generic example of some interactions with a customer. There's an amount involved and a date that takes place over time.
It's such lovely formatting.
Yes, such wonderful. So that's the sort of stuff you would have today. And then the next step up for somebody might be, if they were just kind of enhancing an existing app, is that they end up making it something like this.
A little bit of icon, a little bit of format.
Yeah, maybe some colorization for overdue things or things like that. But really, this still has all these lines and such, and isn't really very effective. But developers have this, I guess, I don't want to call it emotional attachment, that they're in their comfort zone doing data grids.
Grids are our friends, Billy.
Yeah,
Grid is your friend.
But you could do something like this, and then that list box.
Oh, come on! You've rounded the grid now.
I've basically done nothing more than making the grid a little bit more attractive. So, but I mean, that's still a step in the right direction because list boxes are inherently, you've got over and under formatting and varying sizes and things like that. So it is nicer aesthetically and a little bit nicer cognitively. But really what you want, this is a set of things that took place over time. So what you'd really like is to lay it on a timeline like this.
Interesting.
That's adjustable, you see? And then when things start to get overlapping, you make them so that they're offset. Notice that service and that payment. When they get far enough apart, they don't overlap. But if I get them up so they do, but then you can always click and bring one to the front. And that's being displayed with a data template, meaning we could make it look like anything that we want. We could make it vary for different kinds of items and things like that. And then, of course, have the ability to change the offset to suit the particular circumstances. So notice what that does from a design point of view. Things that are clustered are probably related because they took space in a short span of time.
Yeah.
Well, your eyes automatically assume that things that are clustered are related. That's just part of.
I mean, I would think you'd only want to do this where the timeline is an important piece of information, that they were clustered.
Yes, that there is clustering. In this case, you're talking to a client. That first view, it's kind of hard for you to know immediately which items you need to actually pay attention to.
Sure.
The ones that happened recently or something. You can eventually parse those dates out and realize, oh yeah, that's all within a 10-day time frame right there. You can do it, but it's a lot less cognitive effort.
Yeah, you've taken, by taking date and turning it into space in a timeline type of display, now you've actually taken what was numbers and you've made it a visible, something that's visible and easier for us to understand that things are related. And
so leveraging the visual system like that is a really helpful way for both kinds of design. Even if you're just going into an existing app and you're fixing individual views, taking into account things like this and getting controls that will put things on time or take into account graphics and shape and color. Let's see, I've got a couple of slides from my, no, that's not it. Yeah, that is it. Well, let's get over to where those are. Hang on. Oh, I'm in the wrong module. Hang on, let me go get the slides run like 5 modules for that course. Let me load.
And is this part of your curriculum for the workshop at DEVintersection too?
It is. Basically, because I had an opportunity to completely revamp my material for this LinkedIn course, I used the revamped LinkedIn learning course for the workshop that I'm going to do at DEVintersection. I feel it's a lot longer, of course. It's only 2 hours in the
workshop's like 6 or 7, right?
The workshop's like 3 times as long, and of course has hands-on exercises, which is very, very important. So,
well, I got to think anybody going to that is going to have their own problem space they want to work in and press against it to sort of think, how would I think about my problem this way?
And we do typically, try to have some design. Well, there's different people from different companies working together, so in some cases we have to come up with a generic problem for them to work on. But if you've got people that are all coming from a particular company, or some of the individual solo exercises, then they are very much aimed at helping people take some things back that might be good for them.
Sure.
All right. So here, for example, is one of the screens in that. Let's put that bigger so you can see it. So when I put this up, what I do is I just leave it up a few seconds, and I ask people to find the footballs. And I only leave it up about 3 seconds.
Right.
Now, interestingly enough, people can find the footballs in 3 seconds. You'd be surprised how good your visual system is because I put shapes in there.
Right. If they're Americans, that's a football.
If they're Americans, yeah, I did one comment on LinkedIn. I was looking for these soccer balls.
Right.
Yeah.
So I got the wrong number. I got 4 instead of 3. But so you can see that shape helps, but you don't really notice things that you aren't focusing on. So when I take this away, I go, all right, how many basketballs did you see? Well, we're looking for basketballs, so they don't know. And I'll bring it back, let them kind of see that, there are basketballs and volleyballs and various kinds. And I explain the design principle there, but then I go on down to doing things like, all right, this particular way of looking at things, notice that all the shapes are the same sizes. Well, that's helpful. But we can make the shapes even more beneficial if we scale them to the size of the real world objects. that they represent.
Interesting.
That the eye will naturally now pick up baseballs much more easily than it did before.
Yeah, but
Because the size of the baseball, intuitively, their experience, people know that the baseball is small.
but I would get confused. It looks like between a tennis ball and a baseball because they're about the same size.
They are about the same size. The graphics are kind of different, but it would be relatively easy. So you can kind of choose your shape based on differences like that if you wish. This is not from production. This is kind of put together pretty quickly. But then there are all kinds of other ways that we can kind of zero in on it. For example, if we make all the ones that are baseball have a common background color and maybe even do some grouping, then we could end up with an arrangement like this. And now it becomes almost exponentially easier to zero in on the stuff you're trying to find out. And none of this is very hard to do with modern technologies. You just have to think about what's important to users and how they really need to see it. And I've got a slide that kind of compares the two there. You can see that bottom view down there, and understand that I didn't even take the trouble to really come up with nice colors. I just picked colors off the drop down. If we were going to do theming, we'd come up with even nicer colors than this. But this was just to show developers what they could do. If you were just picking colors off the drop down of colors that were available to you, you could do something this good.
Right, and quickly. Like you really haven't changed the layout much. You messed with the order a little bit, but just the background colors and the tinkering with the icons makes a heck of a difference.
Yeah, and so that's the kind of things that in the course I try to convince users that they can do, and the developers that they can do. And I will spend even more time trying to help developers gain some confidence. Some of this stuff it's common sense once you see it.
Sure.
I mean, the idea that we should scale the size to be similar to have some relationship to the real world size. The moment you hear that, you go, well, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, why wouldn't I do that?
But because until our modern technologies, that was actually hard to do. You think about how hard it was to kind of get, before we had binding and all the nice things that we have now, how hard it was to make all those things scale for all the different items. It was actually pretty hard to implement. And in some cases, you go back far enough, it was almost impossible, not economic to do it. So people don't tend to think of it because they've never seen it before. When's the last time you saw something that used size like that to communicate that information?
Yeah, not that often.
Not often. So I show them a lot of examples, and I encourage them to kind of open up. One of the things I say about developers trying to get started in here is the biggest challenge is not learning a design process or learning to use the technologies that will do this. The biggest single challenge is getting your mind broken free from all the way you've always thought about it in the past. Mm-hmm. That's by far the hardest thing to do, and that's what I really work on in that workshop. And look, I'm not going to claim it works for everybody because it depends on how deeply the grooves in your mind are worn as to whether I can get you out of them. But there are some great success stories because I did a similar workshop at DEVintersection in Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. Last year. I'm of course continuing to improve it with some of this new material, but I did a workshop there, and I had a guy come up to me, and he said, "I took your workshop 5 years ago, back when it was pretty new and not nearly as nice as it is now, but I did try to get some of these basic principles across." And he said, "Yeah, it really changed the way that we thought about doing development." I said, "Well, that's good. How did it work out in the long run?" He said, "Well, I sold my company for $40 million to Xerox, so I feel like it was
pretty good for him."
Good for him. And that ability to make software. Look, if you make software that users just look at it and it goes, "Oh yeah, that's what I want to use."
Right.
Look, Apple has made $1 trillion doing that,
mm-hmm.
and it surprises me that. Well, I don't know. What do you guys think? Do people in the Microsoft ecosystem, are they just emotionally convinced they can never do the sort of things that Apple do, and they don't even try?
Are you referring to the skeuomorphic design?
No, I'm talking about just developers in the market. No, the skeuomorphic was kind of a style that was okay for its time period. We've moved to more of a minimalist style now, and because the eye kind of fills in gaps, it turns out we really don't need a skeuomorphic style.
Okay.
I mean, you look at these things, these baseballs and footballs, they're not really skeuomorphic. They're just a basic design, and your eye fills in the gap for what's really there. And I think Apple has gone to that as well. But no, I'm just talking about, look, Well, I was a Windows Phone user for a long time. I thought Windows Phone didn't really. I picked up when Windows Phone finally wasn't viable. I got an Android. It's just junk from a design perspective.
Yeah, it's such a step backwards.
Huge step backwards. I have no idea. When I hit the back button, I have no idea what I'm going back to. None whatsoever.
Well, I don't think anybody does, right? Nobody could predict from app to app what happens when you hit the back button.
So, but the back button also on Windows Phone, you ran into a similar scenario. You hit the back button and you were kind of like, well, let's see where I go back to.
Occasionally, but in general, let's say when I'm doing music playing or something, the back button in Groove worked exactly the way I thought a back button should work.
Right.
It kind of went back to the hierarchy, et cetera. And then so I tried an iPhone, which had technical difficulties with my carrier, so I didn't keep it that long. But from a design perspective and using it, it was just so much smoother. It was intuitive, and I didn't get frustrated. Look, here's the phone. I've had it for a year now, okay?
Yep.
I consider it a personal triumph that this thing isn't in pieces from me throwing it against that brick wall.
You're controlling yourself.
Get off of my lawn.
Calm Billy.
Because I don't know, take my carrier, you can see there's a brick wall right over there. This is what used to be the porch of the house.
Okay.
Now it's my sunroom office. And yeah, I've managed to keep it from shattering into 1,000 pieces. So I think that's a triumph, given how badly designed it is.
Do you think it's just that we have more experienced developers in the sort of .NET space that are a little more resistant to change?
They are kind of resistant to change. The .NET stuff, while it was a big technological revolution, from the standpoint of how you used it, wasn't radically different from the VB6.
No, that carried WinForms forward, right?
That there's a huge surface area for APIs, and so you look at people who learned how to do things in the 90s, and until some of the recent web technologies, some of the JavaScript frameworks, they didn't really change the way they work. They worked hardly at all.
Sure. And I never felt like Microsoft really committed to a style guide for WPF. It seemed like an orphan for the longest time. You were the style guide for WPF.
Yeah, unfortunately, and I mean, we just don't work on that many apps. You need some more variety in style possibilities for modern apps than you do for older Windows forms. But yeah, Microsoft left that hole, and I eventually came to the understanding they didn't produce the reference apps and the style guides and the examples because they didn't know how.
Right. Part of me was like, they should have, if they had bet Office on WPF, there would have been a style guide by the end of that.
Point. You would have had a style guide for at least one general classification of apps.
Sure. Well, you think about the meta. I think about going back earlier, again, being an old developer. For a long time, it was a cadence of new version of Windows, new version of Office, and Office informs what apps should look like today.
Yeah.
And shortly after that, we get a set of tools that let us recreate Outlook.
And of course, we're seeing some baby steps in that direction. That's probably too derogatory. We're seeing some modest steps in that direction in the form of things like Fluent Design. Right. I mean, from a visual perspective, Fluent Design is not bad. They've made some of the theming capabilities just from nothing but visual fairly straightforward in the UWP world. But now let's be fairly straightforward about this. Most of the stuff that's being done right now is not being done in UWP even on native.
No.
And that we're doing WPF, we're doing still a fair amount of Windows forms and such. So we're not really seeing in that world that kind of theming. In fact, when we come in and work with a client, that's one of the big value adds that we do. Because as you might guess, we got a lot of stuff on the shelf.
Sure.
So we bring it in and we plug it into the projects that we work with people, and they get very, very nice theming. You've seen examples of some of our applications, and I put some links at some point
over the years. Stuff. You have a couple of sort of core UI metaphors that I see over and over again that are just sort of beyond the Battleship Gray MDI forms.
Yeah, we have kind of for a long time we did sort of dark theme ways of doing things, which was obviously different from the Battleship Gray. And there are gradients and nice color stuff because I've got a great guy on my team, a tremendous fellow named David Garcia, who is just visually as good as anybody I've seen in this business. You'd have to go into the Apple ecosystem to get somebody as good. And he keeps, I mean, you just look at the app and it has this beautiful aesthetic. And the aesthetic, in many respects, is a proxy for the quality. When you first look at an app, if it doesn't look good, don't you kind of assume that maybe it's not very high quality? So we have some themes. We used dark themes for several years. And the advantage of the dark themes during that period was when you looked at it, instantly your eye goes, this is not Battleship Gray. We're in a completely new world. We started to see shift in the last 2 to 3 years towards lighter themes. That the dark theme had like about a 5-year run, and now the light themes seem to be preferred. They're still not Battleship Gray. They have gentle gradients. They don't look as obviously different from older apps, but they do somehow feel polished and nice to look at. So we have a dark theme, we have a light theme. We plug those things in to our clients, and that plus the ability to figure out how you navigate everything. The desktop equivalent of a single page app, which is quite a bit more complex and flexible than a single page app, but that shell that manages the entire application, that turns out to be something else that Microsoft hasn't really given us. They gave us Prism, but there's a whole section of the industry for which Prism is just too complicated. And so we come in and sort of build a sandbox. I mean, look, I think part of the problem is the developers don't know where to get started on this new modern app stuff.
Okay.
Look, they've always got work to do. Somebody has assigned them a screen, a view that they've got to create. And so they go back to their cubicle and start dragging controls out of the toolbox and get it done. That's just what they've always done. What would they do if they wanted to radically change? They don't know how to, they don't really know what the design process looks like. They don't have the theme. So even if they design something nice and it didn't have a good theme, it wouldn't immediately obviously look that much better, because it's kind of all these things coming together in modern apps that really, really makes them stand out. So I think it's kind of a case of that Microsoft people don't know where to get started. I'm hoping, because I see signs of this, that the design expertise is starting to spread throughout Microsoft. Because in the Windows 8 era, it was obviously horribly deficient.
Well, there was a time where they were saying, like, it's going to be a designer and a developer working together. You know, there was that period, and even before Win 8.
And I'm actually fine with that, except that they don't specify what that process looks like.
Well, and what tools they have aren't that good. And I think I found one or two in all the research I did for all the .NET Rocks episodes, looking for proof of this. I think I found 2.
Yeah.
Like, it's just who can afford a dedicated UX person that works alongside devs like that? Like, it just seems incredibly rare.
Only pretty large companies have that. I am seeing that, by the way, Richard, I'm seeing that start to have a little bit of uptake. I was at one of my former clients recently that is a Fortune 1000 company, and only in the last 3 years have they added that dedicated UX staff.
And this is sort of 10 years after Microsoft was making Blend and Expression and saying, these are the tools for your designer. And they're like, what designer?
But it's just understandable in some respects. You think about it, where was the design talent 10 years ago? Well, it was all pretty much over in the Apple world, wasn't it? How easy is it going to be to get those people to come into this world and work? Okay.
Yeah. Well, and generally speaking, when I do find good dedicated UX people, they are busy.
They are, very
demand is high.
They're in demand, yeah.
Well, that's why I keep. What's one of the things I bring out during that workshop that I'll do down in Orlando is that, look, I'm expensive, and I stay busy
and worth it,
and modest.
No, people. Yeah, well, I've joked sometimes that my rates are extortionate, and it's not just the fact that you can make money at it. Look, everybody in this industry almost is going to hit the wall at some point in terms of their expertise in what they do. Or maybe the company that they have invested a lot of domain knowledge goes under or something. Yeah. It's really nice career insurance to have more of a stack, like what they call a talent stack of things that you can do. And UX design is not that difficult a stack to acquire. It is a discipline and it takes time, but it doesn't take huge amounts of time. It just takes practice doing it.
Sure.
And would you say it's
hard?
Different from programming language? It's portable. You could take that UX design stack, and you know what? I can apply that to mobile. I need to tweak it a little bit, but you can still do it over there. Where my C# programming language, you know what? If I go into a place that only does Java, sorry.
That'd be a problem.
I
look at more like SQL skills, right? That being good at SQL could apply to a lot of different places that you go. And it doesn't mean you stop being a developer, but that you'll often work on projects where you're interfacing to the data. I can see as picking up this UX skill doesn't stop you from being a developer, but you tend to work in that UX space of the development process.
And sort of side by side with that is you get better at it as you get older, as you do it. You build up a pool of ideas. Once you've solved a certain number of problems through design, you start to see the patterns and the similarities. And I've reached the point now, 10 years into this, where this happens a couple times a year. Somebody will come up with a problem they're trying to solve from a design perspective, and I've already seen something similar enough to that. But I go to the whiteboard and start marking and just sketch it, and they look at it and go, "That's just a great design for this. You must be a creative genius." See, no. I'm just somebody who's seen a lot of different solutions to problems.
Yeah, I think the only area of technology I ever got that good at was performance tuning, where somebody describes what's going on with the site. It's like, it's one of these three things. Let's go find it. Right?
Yeah. So, but that's probably makes people feel like they got their money's worth. So
but
okay with feeling that way.
I think you're also describing the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Yeah, the kinds of things that can make a website slow, or the kinds of things that can make a good element of design. But it's the practice, the experience doing that, you know what, you can latch right onto something and say, I've seen this before. It
just becomes instinctive. Let me show you a photo that I've got here. I was working with a company outside the Microsoft space, actually. No, that's not it. Sorry. It's a different one. It's a smaller one. Oh, no, I guess I put it in Paint, did I? The extract. Okay, yeah, there we are. All right, so take a look at this. This is a development environment. And so these are the moral equivalent of events in this environment. And so there's code behind, basically. Now, some of the code behind is automatically generated for you by the environment. That you just indicate that you want it, and it all spills in there. And then sometimes the code behind kind of refers and builds on itself. Okay. So notice over there on the side, we've got this edit button. That's for you to edit the code behind kind of directly.
Right.
And this is to unlink all of that code behind. And basically, the iconography is bad because it means to throw it all away.
Oh, okay. And I looked at the blue and said, "Oh, this must be where there's already code." If I wanted to look at it.
Well, the blue means there already is some there. But if you click the little link thing, you're unlinking, I guess, is the idea, and you're throwing all that code away.
Breaking the link?
Breaking the link, and there's no recovery from that, including all the other code that might be. Now, it's all messed up, too. And there's no reversal for it. Now, I say that, and notice I had to use this button all the time.
Right.
I almost never use this, but look how close they are.
Yeah, easy to miss.
So 2 times.
And there's no undo.
There's no undo.
It's always a sin.
And
I never know a scenario where no undo is a good idea.
And so, and look, this is a $1 billion product.
Yeah.
And the developers, who are very talented technically, are making what to me is the same mistake that a programmer would make if he made a global variable somewhere. Or something. It's the same sort of bad idea. And I told them about it, and they did put a confirmation there. But that was after I lost 2 hours of work by inadvertently clicking one of those things and throwing away a bunch of work that I had done.
And putting an "Are you sure?" is not a cure-all, because we've pretty much been trained to just agree with any dialogue that pops up to make it go away.
Amen to that.
It's a cover-up for a bad design.
It's a cover-up for bad design. It's better than nothing, because I did hit the confirmation once after they put it in, and it saved my bacon. Yeah. But it's because I kind of already knew. If I were a naive developer who hadn't already lost, let's put it this way, you're going to lose some work at least once before you figure out that confirmation is important.
I mean, we're using OBS, the Open Broadcast Software, to produce this video right now. It doesn't have an undo stack. I'll go you one further. They just started adding the ability to snap position of things. So it becomes really hard to make sure things are square. Things are lined up right. Yeah. It's like, okay, guys.
Oh, I've watched you fuss with that, brother. Like that, it's way harder than it needs to be.
Oh, but what it does for the features that it has is amazing. The design, the ability to, these little things to just make it easier. Snap to things. Give me an undo.
Presume if I have two boxes and I'm moving them close to each other, I want them the same size, or I want them aligned at the top, or I want them aligned in the center. Like, heck, you know what? PowerPoint does a pretty good job of that. Showing those little marker lines. It's like you now have these lined up in the center.
Exactly.
You know, like just make it simpler.
And good successful software does, I think, move in that direction. Camtasia, for example, has improved in terms of that sort of thing over time. I found using Camtasia to be much easier this most recent round in the fall that I was doing some videos than it was 4 years earlier when I did another series. Mm-hmm. So yeah, but you almost have to get to really high-end software now to see the investment made to do that. And I think it's because the construction of UI, look, we all know about the problems with HTML5 and JavaScript and how every page comes together like the Terminator and Terminator 2. Droplets come from all over the place and make up the final page. So that's hard, but native software is hard too.
Right.
Learning modern stack like XAML is really hard. And outdoing native software for iOS with their frameworks is hard. So I feel like there's this latent demand, especially for sort of middle-end software, that we're gonna see something bust loose there in the cloud era of things. VS Code and a few things like Google Flutter are kind of showing us that there is a need for a simpler stack that abstracts a lot of things away, and it has things like animation and the ability to snap everything together. Pardon me. That's just going to be baked into the cake. And in addition to things like voice recognition, I mean, if you had a development environment that was completely cloud-based that described the UI in metadata so that it could express it to different front ends, you could tie in voice recognition and transportation routing and picture recognition, and all those things would just be switches that you flipped, and your app would have them. And I foresee that we're going to see an environment like that 5 years from now, 10 years from now.
It does feel to me like we're coming on the cusp of a major UX revision between voice and image recognition and a little more anticipation. I'm just wondering if we're going to need a disruptive device, and my guess is the visor, the HoloLens-like device, might just tear up the UX space all of a sudden if that product takes off.
The idea that gaze is an interaction with my user interface. Mm-hmm. I'm looking in this direction, and the cameras are so good that are right above our screens that they're able to help with that, I think is very compelling.
Yeah, well, and now we're adding gaze to touch and mouse and something in your hand that you click, or something you wear on your arm that senses muscle, or something that you wear with brainwaves. I'm not willing to say exactly what the combination of interactions is going to click, but I'm pretty sure that some combination of interactions is going to turn things upside down in the next 10 years.
Yeah. So I want to catch up with a question that we have here in the chat room from Adam TT222. Asking, how do you convince product owners that UX is needed, that it's important when they're clearly not on that road yet?
Well, I'm going to spend some time talking about that in the workshop, because that is one of the more complex things that comes up. There are basically 2 or 3 channels by which you can do that. One of them is just sheer ROI, just numbers. And this works best when you have large user populations, hundreds or thousands. Then it doesn't take very much productivity improvement to yield 7- and 8-figure savings for large numbers of users. And then you also look at prevention of errors. That we work in healthcare, where an error done by a single person would cost more than they make in a year in many cases.
Right.
So you're talking about dramatic savings there. We've had 3 of our clients where we wiped out a week of training for everybody who came into the system. If you have very transient user base, then wiping out that week of training is a pretty big thing. I wrote an article for MSDN online several years ago that goes through the formulas for how you calculate some of that stuff. So some of the people are very susceptible to that argument if they're kind of from that accounting mentality. Others are more visual, and they respond to excellent examples. They respond to apps that are obviously extremely different from what they have now, but very compelling. That works particularly well when the software is either being used as a service that people subscribe to or as a package that gets sold, because that kind of just the fact that it feels so good when you use it will fuel sales. And it also reduces tech support for software companies. People in a software company, one of the biggest things I find that lights them up is if the software keeps users, their end users where they sold the package, from making a mistake, then that saves calls to tech support.
Sure.
And the best case we've seen for that so far is a user that cut tech support about 30%.
The challenge is measuring tech support calls you didn't take.
Yeah.
Yes.
But if you've got a year's worth of tech support already in place, you know roughly what your number of tech calls per sold copy is.
Yeah.
And then you see that number drop down. Okay, there's something interesting.
Make a rough estimate there.
These are tricky things to measure.
Yeah. And then finally, some people respond to more emotional arguments. It kind of depends on their age and some other things. So you think about this, for example, that you've got a 24-year-old coming into this company, this pretty good-sized company, and they've used an iPhone or Android phone all their life, on a tablet, but have never owned a laptop. And you sit them down in front of the typical 1990s design-looking corporate application, and you say, this is what you're going to have to work with 8 hours a day as long as you're here. Okay, so what's the emotional reaction that you get out of that 24-year-old to looking at, look, let's see if I can find it. I think I've got it somewhere. The screen that I used as kind of my spoofed example of that I made for the course, here it is. Okay,
oh my gosh. Hang on, let me show this one off to our friends here. There you go. Look at that.
Old school.
This is the kind of screen that you typically see.
That's
That's a life sucker. That's what that is.
And this one is spoofed, of course. So the further you go, you realize that it's complete gibberish. But when you look at it, you can't tell it's gibberish. It just looks like a typical. I asked people when I first put it up, how many of you have screens that look kind of like this? 90% of the people are raising their hands. So you think about putting a young person who's never seen software like this in their life, and this is what they're expected to use now for the next several years.
Welcome to your life.
Yeah, that doesn't exactly increase respect for the company, motivation to do their job well. So some people respond to those emotional arguments to say, if you're going to put junk like this in front of people, you are going to pay a price for that. In terms of their motivation, et cetera. So different people that don't see the value respond to different things.
Now, there's another good question here in the chat room from Silicon Orchid. As we look at the way that the user interfaces used to be, nice big title bar, you've got some borders on the windows that are easy, that you can practically grab it right there. In fact, if I reach over here, I might actually be able to grab it. But when you look at the trend in Windows 10, and I'm not even sure if you see it so much on the Mac, but the trend that we're seeing in new applications on Windows 10 is borderless. There is no border. It's hard to find exactly where that little pixel width is there. And in the title bar, I'm seeing more and more applications where they're getting rid of that title bar, and they're actually merging the toolbar with the title bar. So you just have in the middle of your toolbar somewhere the title of the application. I've run into this problem where I see it with Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to mention that team for a second here. Trying to find the right space there so I can grab and move the folder around ends up being a challenge with my mouse, like I'm a scavenger hunt.
That's my feeling. They've gone a little bit too far, both Windows and I don't know so much about the Mac. But I have had cases where I'm having trouble figuring out where to grab this thing to pull it to a different monitor.
Right.
And as soon as that's the case, then see, the motivation of the designers who are doing that is that and it's a very trendy thing right now, to be extremely clean. And that's kind of a reaction to the kind of screen you see here, where there's borders and boxes around everything. They're trying to move to things that are much cleaner and white space is used. Now, to a certain extent, I think that's a good move, but it's one of those things where if making it kind of clean is good, making it super clean must be better. That must be great. That they push the design community tends to push things in an area until they push it too far. Skeuomorphic design got pushed too far.
Yeah.
And it was just like, I have to make a perfectly rendered picture of a speaker. No, you don't. All they got to do is recognize that it's a speaker very, very quickly.
And the running gag with that now is the 3.5-inch floppy that everybody actually thinks of as a save icon.
Save.
Right?
Yeah.
Like the actual metaphor is gone. It's just a symbol that people recognize as much as they recognize a stop sign.
And the camera icon is probably going to go down that same road.
Oh, gosh.
People own the camera now. So yeah, I think there's a certain stylistic thing where people just push it to it's too clean. They get, and this is the difference between visual designers and interaction designers. Interaction designers are all about, does this make sense to the user? Do they like this? Visual designers are more about the aesthetics, and they're the ones who I think have pushed things to the really, really clean area. Now, look, I like clean apps. I don't like a lot of boxes. It's one of the reasons I don't like data grids. It's all these lines.
Billy, wait a sec. That user interface you have there is beautiful to me. I can put my T-square there and everything lines up perfectly.
Everything lines up. It absolutely lines up perfectly. And you can go over there and control your dingle plops and your raster possums. You know, complete control over that in that upper right spreadsheet there. Now, the lines, most developers group things with the lines because that's what they've always seen.
Sure.
You can group with white space much more effectively, and you don't need to show all of this. This is not anything we would ever create. This would be 3 separate screens that we presented to the user at the point that they needed them, and each one would be quite a bit spaced out. But yeah, the person asking the question is correct that the designers have probably pushed that too far.
Yeah.
But you know, they pushed the flat design too far too.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
You remember during the Windows 8 era, everything was so flat, and it was so flat that in many cases the icons lost a lot of their visual sort of feel. And I think there's still some of that. I probably shouldn't say this, but to me, the Windows Maps app icon has always, here, I'll show it.
Sure.
Put it up here. Right here. This looks like a toilet seat to me.
Wait, hang on. Where is it?
Is that really what somebody wants in software?
I mean, so the flat thing.
Hang on. I don't think we can see it just yet. Let me see if we can. Yeah, there it is behind you. Hang on. Let me hide some of our pictures here so we can see that.
Just a trend that got started, and so it's kind of fading off. I hope to see some of the chromeless, borderless designs get moderated a little bit too, at least to the extent that I can see where to drag the window around and where its edge is.
Get sound back there, Jeffy.
Yeah, something happened when I changed scenes and it dropped. All of a sudden, the mixer disappeared on the on the set.
That's nice.
Yeah.
This software,
it's a great user interface.
Yeah.
Great user interface.
Well, sometimes it's a quality thing too. And I think I mentioned this last time I was on .NET Rocks. We're not in the golden age of software reliability. We're in the rust age.
Yeah. We got to learn how to scrub that off and clean it up.
Yeah.
It does feel like we have a lot more older software around that is rustier, but yeah, it's also, we've also been battling mobile. I mean, that's where folks have been fighting most of the time. It seems like a lot of the effort. I'm also wondering if, have we lost the window on desktop development? Why would you just build if you're especially in the enterprise dev space, why aren't you just building web apps for everything?
Well,
we've got a lot of tooling.
there are some cases where, well, first of all, my own philosophy has always been, you pick the platform that makes the most sense for your users.
Yeah.
If you're at the enterprise level and you've got hundreds of users, your biggest argument for doing kind of native stuff, as we've done for a big snack food manufacturer recently, if you're doing intense data analysis kind of things and you control the platform, first of all, you're going to be able to develop in a half to a third of the time for these complex visualizations and such.
Okay.
Because native is just better for that. Desktop is better for that. And the more users you've got that you control, sort of the more that productivity counts. But when you get into distributed organizations where people are just all over the place, then the deployment value of web-based apps goes up, and so it makes more sense to do that there. But most of the applications we end up doing have all three. There's some set of people who are very high value users, and we end up writing native software for them. There's maybe customers or some set of less priority users, and they get web apps. And then somebody who's going in to scan stuff for inventory or something, there's a mobile app, or maybe there's a consumer mobile app. So for us, it's all about having multiple heads. And if you design your backend effectively so that it delivers data up in a way that's properly shaped to use in the UI pretty effectively, then adding on another channel like mobile doesn't really cost that much in terms of development. And adding both desktop and web, we don't see that as more than about a 10 to 15% delta over something that doesn't use that. So if you're going to do a big complex web app and you've got a lot of data you've got some subset of users that's got a lot of data and they're going to use it more intensely, then the economic case for building a desktop app can be pretty good. So as I said, we did this with a manufacturer recently. The canonical app for that would probably be something like stock trading, where any kind of app where real-time information is just coming in all the time, and it's very, very complex, and clicks and milliseconds really count, then the desktop has a place there. The other place that desktop software is doing pretty well is in small to medium companies. And the problem there with web apps is simple. They're too complicated and hard to build, and they change too fast. These guys can't have a team. They can't afford a team of 4 or 5 or 6 developers. They've got maybe a couple of people back there. They understand Windows Forms or whatever technology that they're using. They do those apps, and the barrier for them to move to a web app version is very high for no significant benefit. If they don't have a geographically distributed organization, what's the benefit of web apps? Deployment maybe, but they've already figured out deployment for their Windows Forms. They've had 15 years to do that. So in the small to medium space, I still see a lot of desktop development. And in fact, the statistics I've seen say there's a lot of VB still in that space too. That it's a perfectly fine language for those people, that the numbers aren't decreasing. I saw an article recently that VB still comes in as number 5 in terms of languages used to create business software.
Yeah, especially in the inside of an organization.
Yeah.
Where I see the web app really grabbing a hold is when you're looking at what it takes to also build mobile apps and so forth, saying, hey, if I could build the progressive web app and get a good enough UI out of that, and it'll run on the PC and on the mobile devices with one code base, I'm going to do that.
Yeah, the key is that good enough UI, because if I'm doing mobile native, I've got access to some capabilities to make that app quite a bit better to use. But if you're not going to do good UX design, then you're not going to realize that value. So, I think that's kind of the thinking for a lot of people is, well, theoretically speaking, the native stuff could give us really better UX design, but we in fact don't know how to do that. So we're not going to get that value.
Right.
So.
All right.
Well, Billy, always a blast to talk to you, my friend. Thanks so much for being part of this. I'm really looking forward to seeing your workshop at DEVintersection.
Oh my gosh. So
have fun with that. And that's in the middle of a busy week too. I am leaving that night to go to Norway to do a 2 version of that workshop.
Oh man. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Billy. This has been great. And I heard you were in Las Vegas last week, and you said something. You said something about me. No, you said something about Microsoft folks. And I think this is a good transition to our next speaker, who is a Microsoft person. We make sure that we key in on him here.
Well, I'll briefly kind of recap that. I was in a session called my most valuable lessons I've learned from 40 years of software development.
Okay.
And actually, that was packed, and nobody left. I'm always surprised that those sessions really resonate with people. But one of the things I told them was, when you get a chance to talk to a Microsoft person, understand that they're all very, very busy, and they all have a bit of attention deficit disorder. So, you do the best you can with them while you've got them, but they'll don't be surprised if they kind of are a little bit quicker to get to the point where they're ready to end the conversation. And their standard phrase to end the conversation is when they say, "That's good feedback."
What's wrong with that?
I've also found when they actually agree with you, but they're not allowed to say they agree with you because it's some battle inside of the team. And so as an external, you've said something that hit on that battle, like, that's great feedback.
Yeah, yeah.
But I don't mistake someone's positive response to me to not be, what do I need to say to have you stop talking?
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Because that's also a thing.
So thanks so much, Billy. We really appreciate it. And that was great feedback. We're going to take that to our next guest.
Oh, seriously, when I talked about that around the dinner room table one time when I first put that into a presentation. And the next time that my wife told my oldest son to clean up his room, he said, "Mom, that's great feedback."
Well.
All right, guys, I enjoyed it.
All right. Thank you, Billy. And let's see. We're going to disconnect. Let me see if I can do this right. Am I going to do this right this time? There we go.
Let's find out. We're going to find out.
All right, I'm ready to hang up now.
Yeah, here we go. Thanks so much, Billy. And we're out. All right. Oh my gosh. It's always so great to learn from him. Since the first time I met him at a tech ed, what was it? It was the Speaker Idol. How many years ago?
Speaker Idol. Holy
2012.
Man. Right, I used to get him as a judge on a regular basis too, because he always had some good insights.
Tremendous.
On how to make a 5-minute talk really work.
Yes. Right. And the things that I learned from him just in that 5-10 minutes of judging and commentary that he had afterward, I've brought forward, and I hope you don't hear me with the ums and uhs and the speaking tics. And I know when I have them, and I've actually wired up buttons on my Stream Deck so that they do the speaking tics and not me. As soon as I know I'm going to hit the button and do that instead. And then everybody laughs.
It's funnier.
It is. It's so much funnier. Swiftress in the chat room is asking, "This was fun. Is there a schedule for future broadcasts?" If you click the events button it's right above my head here. It'll show you the other ones that we have scheduled for the next month or so, maybe even 2 months leading up to the Orlando event.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an in-person event where you'll be able to see Richard, myself, Billy, and our next guest, who I'm going to try and get dialed in here, Mr. Brady Gaster. Let's see if I can find him real quick in the Skype. I was just talking to him last night. Where is he? I've got him here. There we go.
In the chat.
He's in the chat.
Around.
Let's see if we can get him to jump on the call here. I hit the add button. Here he comes.
There you go.
There we go. Let me get that configured. It is... yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you there, buddy.
We can hear you.
I tell you.
Wow, that is some wallpaper, too. Holy man.
Oh, my gosh. And we're going to change over to Brady. There we go.
I just want to see if you can drop it in the right spot on the screen first try.
Watch this. First try. Here we go. Our next guest, Mr. Brady Gaster, is on that side now. Hey there. And you're looking way up here, man.
I'm looking up at the big screen.
Yeah.
There you go. So it's all where the camera is, I guess. Right?
So, Brady, why don't you introduce yourself? Let the folks know who you are.
Sure. Let me do one thing real quickly before I confuse myself and close Twitch for a minute. Because I've got 2 windows with myself open. That's confusing.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I'm Brady Gaster. I am up in Redmond at the mothership. I work on the ASP.NET Core team, specifically PMing my favorite technology other than Midi, SignalR, which is the real-time technology. We'll talk about that a little bit today. And I also handle, along with my buddy Glenn Condren, who's kind of the spiritual leader for .NET Core and microservices. I kind of work with him on microservices and Kubernetes and containers And then I kind of work with Azure partner teams because a lot of people know me as an Azure guy. I work with the Azure partner teams to make sure that ASP.NET Core developers have a good experience for deving on Azure. So after this, I'll have a meeting with the gentleman in the Event Grid SDK team, where we'll be talking about Preview 3 / Preview 4 with the Event Grid SDK, because I'm having an interesting, we'll say, opportunity right now.
You're giving us a behind-the-scenes look here, man. Spoiler alert. Coming soon, Event Grid coolness.
Well, it's already out there. Our good buddy Cam Soper wrote a really awesome article on how to use the Event Grid SDK with .NET Core 2.2. It's actually up in my monitor right now. So you can actually see how to party on that today. But what I'm trying to do is make sure you can also party on it tomorrow. So we'll get there. So that's good stuff.
And I'm not just going to make fun of Midi because, of course, Carl is a big Midi fan as well. And there is an update to Midi specification, right? The Manufacturers Association adopted 2 new Midi specifications, the polyphonic expression and the capability inquiry.
I don't know about the capability inquiry, but polyphonic would be good.
Yeah.
I actually just had I got a new device yesterday, so I was a little rat holing last night with this new device, and it has an interesting feature that my other 2 MIDI controllers don't have. It actually has polyphony, so I can actually play. Okay, I guess I should back up and talk about what a MIDI controller is. It's basically the keyboard that you have in front of you for all the 10 or 15 instruments you have on your desk that you can play, like this, or you can just play like this. So the 2 that I don't have, or the 2 that I don't have hooked up right now that I'm going to replace with the one I got yesterday, they don't support polyphony. So the idea behind that is I can only play 1 note at a time, if you will. And the new one that I have, you can actually play chords. So if you play music, the idea of being able to play a chord is pretty significant. And we can only play 1 note at a time. Yeah, it's kind of fundamental. So you can either be a scales person or you can be a chords person. So if you're
the real question is, are they still shipping with 5-pin DIN connectors? Because that is super old school.
Oh, man.
They do. They still ship it with 5-pin connectors. And I actually recently ordered some right angle MIDI cables,
fancy.
Which is kind of cool because they're deep, the cables are about this deep. So when you plug them in, if you've got a device right behind it, you have to kind of push that device
it'll
back.
leave a big space.
Right. So the right angle connectors are great, but here's the catch with the right angle connectors. Have you ever looked closely at one? And most importantly, have you ever looked at both ends of a right angle connector? Because on one end of it, the 5 pins are at the top, and on the other end, they're at the bottom.
Nice.
So literally on one side, you got the angle going this way, and the other side, you got the angle going this way. So for people like myself,
side.
Yeah. So people like myself who are OCD, that is
I was
a
gonna
bad
say.
thing.
The fact that you would have handed DINs, right angle DINs, is concerning.
Yeah.
And here's an interesting comment from Swiftress in the chat room. I've often thought you could build a perf library that would translate ETW events to MIDI notes in track execution in something like Pro Tools or Reason.
You could do that. That's
that
a really
would be
good
interesting.
idea.
The music of a crashing server.
I'm literally listening to your website crash.
It's funny. It's funny. You guys should look up the Electron. I'll have to put it in the show notes for you. It's called the Electron Digitract. It's a Swedish instrument the one I picked up yesterday. The guy who built it, the guy who's kind of, I guess he's the guy who's behind the company. He has a video demo that he does where he actually wires up the controller to 3 MIDI instruments, all of which are literally controlling a servo that just plays a drum. And he's got one wired up like
literally a heartbeat.
Speaker. So cool. So he's got like these 3 like really primitive instruments, and then he's got all these synthesizers around him. So it makes for a pretty cool sound. But I don't think we're here to talk about music, but we can talk about music.
But you
I'm
have
happy to distract you, Brady. That's one of my favorite things.
Oh, but one of the things that you have done is you've actually mixed MIDI with SignalR to put together some pretty cool demos when SignalR was just a .NET framework thing. But now here we are, 2019. SignalR it's an ASP.NET Core thing. ASP.NET Core SignalR. Now we can take our SignalR fun to other places and serve it from Mac, from Linux. get outside of the
true.
Windows box.
This is true, and thanks for taking that up. We actually have a series of clients for SignalR now. Obviously, we've got the .NET Core client and the
Sure.
.NET, the .NET framework client for ASP.NET and SignalR, which I'll go ahead and differentiate the two. So we've got ASP.NET SignalR, then we've got ASP.NET Core SignalR. We don't just call it Core SignalR because it's a part of the ASP.NET family of products. But we've always had a JavaScript client for SignalR because we wanted people to be able to do real time in their client applications.
In their browser client applications.
Browser client applications. So you do JavaScript and whatnot. So that's all been, that's been around for quite some time, as has the .NET client. And we've done a decent job a while back of implementing a Java client. But with the ASP.NET Core stuff and the new ASP.NET Core SignalR, we've actually kind of started over. Andrew Stanton-Nurse, one of the devs who kind of took it over, has done a great job with basically building it all back up again. And one of the things that he did was he actually added we actually wrote a protocol. So there's actually a SignalR hub protocol that, let's say you wanted to write a client in Rust or in Go or in Python. You could actually refer to that protocol specification, and everything that we do adheres to that. So if you wanted to write the client in any language you want, you actually just literally do what you would do with HTTP spec. You would just look at the protocol and write the client, and if it works against the protocol, it'll work. And that would work against the service and against a server-side hub. So today, using that protocol, the protocol spec rather, we've actually implemented a raw Java client. So you could write an Android app that would talk to a SignalR hub. Or the SignalR service, which we'll get into, I guess. We've also got a C++ client that's coming with the 3.0 release. So Richard was talking about, Midi before, and we've talked about like the different things that I've done around Midi. When I've done that, I've done that both from the JavaScript client running Node and from the .NET client running against, I think, a library Pete Brown told me about, frankly, or maybe even Carl told me about, that was .NET standard compliant. So I partied on it a little bit. But imagine what you could do with C++. A lot of libraries are written in C++, so if we have a C++ client for SignalR, now we can do some pretty interesting things. I've even thought about building the demo that Jeff's talking about. If you look at the Ignite 2018 session on SignalR, we did it there. Effectively, I have a sampler, and I wire the sampler up to a SignalR hub, and then people in the audience, they push a button, and like one person might get the bass drum, one person might get the snare drum.
Wait, they're pushing a button on their phone?
Screen in a web browser.
Okay.
So they would actually open up a web browser, and the way it would work is I would have 10 samples on the device. It's as many as it would support. The new device would support hundreds, so we could definitely have fun next time we do this.
Chaos.
Yeah, be fun.
All the noise.
You got it. You're gonna do this at DevInt, aren't you?
Totally.
Great.
I'll have to bring the device. That'll be fun.
Yeah.
It's actually funny. I talked to Dan Rosanova about it because Dan Rosanova has the same sampler. And one thing that we talked about doing was wiring up together, and we'd play together. But that sampler doesn't have a MIDI out. It only has a MIDI in. So you'd have to basically put a UI up on the screen, play the UI, and then it would actually send a message out to each one of the things. But it was fun because I kept telling people in the Ignite audience, I would like move my hands down, like stop playing for a second so I can say something. There were people watching on the internet playing the instrument. So that was pretty cool. That was pretty awesome because it was being live streamed. So we actually had people all over.
I like
playing
that you were
conducting
the audience. That's hilarious.
Yeah. Well, actually, I called it conductor with no OR, just big R at the end, because that's the SignalR application naming convention.
So SignalR allows us to have that real-time interaction between a server that's running ASP.NET Core and some sort of a client. And you've given us a couple of the clients that are out there: Java, JavaScript, of course, .NET, .NET Core. Swiftress in the chat room is actually calling back to a session I hosted yesterday about reactive extensions. And building with reactive extensions, it feels like reactive and SignalR might be a good mix, or are they something that you wouldn't want to use together?
The jury's kind of out on that. I mean, we've had people talk about React and JavaScript with SignalR in the past, and I've actually seen some pretty fantastic demos of people using the React extensions for .NET with SignalR. One of those presentations is actually on Channel 9. It was a gentleman, I can't remember, I think he was on the RX team here at Microsoft, but he did a presentation at Build some time back with the original Connect SDK. Actually used the React extensions to wire up a skeletal tracker with the Connect. And it was kind of neat the way he kind of dialed it all in. I'll see if I can find the URL and we can put it out in the show notes. But he basically got everything wired up, and then he wrote one line of code to basically start sending all those messages to a SignalR hub. So he actually used React on the .NET side and then started transmitting all that data over to SignalR. So that was pretty cool. I have seen some people use the two together. I'm not going to tell you it's a it's kind of like, should you use Angular and SignalR together, or should you use Vue and SignalR together? You should use whatever you're comfortable with and SignalR. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
No bias.
So, yeah, no bias.
So, and it looks like we've got a couple of our friends here jumping into the chat room from who are either on their way to MVP Summit or out and about. I see Scott Cade is here. Jimmy Engstrom is there in the chat room. Steve Gordon.
For the record, Jimmy Engstrom is upstairs. Jimmy and Jess actually came to visit me before the MVP Summit, so they're here now, and we'll be driving down on Sunday.
So, and Swiftress is suggesting that Brady misunderstood the question. No, reactive extensions is what Brady was referring to, and using that in JavaScript, in .NET. There are demos of folks using older SignalR with that. So
yeah, with reactive JS, not React JS, but reactive.
Yeah.
X.
I don't know a lot about. I know a lot about the reactive .NET stuff. I don't know a lot about reactive JavaScript, but we could talk offline. Definitely.
Yeah,
no,
they're all related.
And this is confusing, right? Reactive extensions, the React and the React JavaScript framework, two different things. Yeah.
We will react to that great feedback.
Oh, shame.
Look at that.
Yeah, he's doing that.
So, okay, so Richard, I gotta tell you, I was talking to Brady the other night as we were thinking about.
There's your mistake right there.
Why isn't that going? There we go.
Oh, he's getting there. He's getting there.
Yeah. So I had this set there. Now everybody can hear it. I didn't have to. And I was saying to Brady, if we're gonna do a SignalR talk here on Twitch.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to talk about being able to reach out and let anybody connect to these things. Azure SignalR service is kind of a cool thing. If we wanted to talk about that and let anybody in the Twitch chat room interact with us, don't we have a demo or two we could share that shows some of that stuff and just get a little nutty?
We totally do. So let me go ahead and pull up a browser here real quick. I've been sitting here. I knew you were going to do this. So I've been sitting here trying to think of the best way for us to actually do.
I can do segues. Let me tell you.
I know you can do segues. So I'm bringing in
up that meatball.
So I'm bringing in the portal here. So what I'm going to want.
Hang on. I need you to share your screen on Skype.
Oh, shoot. Let me do that.
There you go.
Where do
And then we'll see if I still have that broken screen from when we had Billy on, and it just.
Out in a sec.
I know.
Or we all get muted.
Absolutely. While you're bringing that up, Jimmy's dropping a plug in here. They did an episode of their Coding After Work podcast with Brady talking about the conductor demo. Yeah, absolutely. Nice. Thanks for the link there. Check that out and download that.
Funny story on that. So I have to give Richard a thank you and I'm sorry at the same time, which I know my mom said was never a good idea to do. Richard did a great job of introducing me to a gentleman who wanted to do a podcast at Ignite on SignalR. And it was a very JavaScript focused podcast, and we got together, and it was really funny because I got to the podcast booth a few minutes early because I just do that. And by the way, don't ever go to a meeting with Jeff early, ever.
What are you talking about?
So I go to this thing, and I'd been working on the sampler demo, which is actually kind of a V2 of a demo I'd done at Ignite 2015. And it wasn't working, and it still wasn't working, and things weren't good. And at the time, I knew I was going to become the SignalR PM, so I kind of had, I wanted this demo to be really good, and it hadn't gone well. So I'm waiting for the podcast gentleman to come and interview me, and I get the demo working, and I literally jumped like 3 feet in the air. I was like, "Oh my God, it works!" And I turn around, and there he is, and he's looking at me like this. like terrified. He's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like,
Is everything
"I'm
fine?
great." So I don't know if he ever posted that podcast. I think I scared him. So, so
Don't
what I'm
scare the
going to do
podcaster.
exactly. So you guys see the URL that I have up here. I wanted to see if you would actually open that up on your side. 'Cause I think
StreamerAzureWebsites.net. Let me share that in the
Streamer-
chat room.
Yep. And Cecil and I have done a demo of this on a Channel 9 episode that we did a couple weeks back during the Snowmageddon. So if you've seen that already, I apologize, but we're going to get to something cool, I promise. So what I'd like to do here is I see Tacky04. Is that one of you guys, or is that somebody on the internet?
Somebody else.
Somebody else.
How brave are we feeling today?
They're in
here.
the chat at least, right?
Okay, we'll do C#. So I'll go ahead and watch
You
C# Fritz's stream here. I'll click this, and if it pops up here,
Yeah.
doesn't look like access to his camera.
No,
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
give you
Or
access to my camera.
You got to give access to your camera.
I can't. I'm broadcasting with it right now.
Yeah. Camera's a little busy.
Okay, we'll see if he can do it either.
Let me try this again. Yeah, I didn't. Here, fine. I'll do that. Do this. Yeah, I'll let you. Fine. Go ahead.
Is it going to work?
No, because the camera's being used by OBS.
Yeah.
And I'm probably having the same thing. Okay, so Chacky04, please don't do anything
Too
questionable.
horrible.
Too horrible?
So what we're watching right now is somebody out there. So he's on screen right now, so please be nice.
Right.
Remember, the G audience. So he's out there, and what he's doing is he stopped. We'll do Jimmy.
You scared him. There's
Jimmy. Hey, Jimmy. There's my man, Jimmy.
So you're
Right
literally...
now-
Okay, go ahead.
So this is, I'm going to tee up a bunch of stuff here. So this is one of our new features that we're releasing in SignalR for ASP.NET Core v3, which is coming out. Jimmy's waving. Hey, buddy. So later on this year, we'll be releasing v3. This is actually in one of our preview releases that you can party on now. So if you wanted to go ahead and pull the v3 framework preview, you could try this out now. What is happening here is we're actually taking picture by picture in the browser. We're converting the picture into ASCII text using some open source thing that our dev Brennan found. Then we're sending that ASCII text up to the server, and then the ASCII text is coming back in streaming fashion. So this is SignalR client to server streaming. So by the time you see the ASCII on screen, it's already hit the server and bounced out to all the connected clients.
Right.
So you're just
cool.
you're streaming data. It happens to be ASCII of a video.
Which is
Correct.
cool.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I'll stop watching Jimmy and we'll watch. I'm just going to trust that all of you are doing G-rated things. So we'll watch this guy. Now he's at work. Hey, you're on camera.
There you
So
go.
he's on camera now. He's like, everybody does this.
Hey,
They're like,
Johan. Yeah.
so there's Johan. Watch
Waving
Johan.
to us. There you go.
Cool.
That's awesome.
Cool. Especially I have multiple guests today on the show. He's like, please be Bob. No. I think I don't want to push my luck anymore. So
No.
but as you can see, this is a 3.0 thing, and if you're wondering where to get it, I'll go out to GitHub and I'll go to SignalR, and then we have this new convention we're doing where we kind of have sample and then the name of the sample. So if you want to party on this, you can actually download this and try it out today. Here's our GitHub repository right here. This is a 3.0 preview thing, so you would be running ASP.NET preview if you were to try to party on this.
There you go. I think that's the right link in the chat room.
I think so. Let me look. That is indeed.
Cool. All right.
It is reminiscent of YouTube's ASCII mode. Now, another thing, speaking of ASCII,
Yeah.
we've had a lot of fun here.
And then
So, and then,
I've got plenty
can I
of
get a
them.
name then?
Can you get just one?
So here's another one that I recently did. Have you guys heard about this cool thing called Razor Components or Blazor? Everybody talking about it?
Did a show on it.
Oh yeah.
You did a show on it. So we have a we have a session at Dev Intersections. We'll be talking about it at. But this is a thing that I found this cool open source package called Fiddle Fonts the other day.
Fiddle
And
Fonts.
I love it. I would encourage you to take a peek at it. The idea is you can actually make ASCII art just by saying fiddlefonts.fontname.render, and then you give it a string. So you
Okay.
can literally like imagine what you could do with iLog or in-app insights with this. This could be fun.
Wow.
Okay.
So instead of doing that, I did this. So this is actually a ASP.NET 3 Razor Components app. And what I've done is I'm iterating through all 255, I think, fonts that they've got in the Fiddle Fonts set. And basically taking like a string and like writing them all out. I need to put a copy button on these guys. So here's like a teddy bear font. Here's like a big chief font and all this. So this is cool, but we don't want to talk about that. What we want to talk about
Yeah, I want to be able to copy these and...
Yeah, you've got an ASCII thing going on here, Brady.
I do have an ASCII.
I see a theme. Yeah,
I want to be able to copy these and put them into my GitHub pull request comments.
For sure.
This is also on GitHub, so you can send me a pull request.
Okay, so. I will do that. I will write you a pull request in an upcoming stream.
Okay, so what we could do is Figulator. It's right here, Figulator. So if you wanted to try that, so there's your. If you want to post that in the show notes. Now, this is a ASP.NET Core 3.0 Razor Components app. The way I got it literally was to go here, and then I'll say...
can you push up your font size there a little bit?
And push up my font size. I think I can.
There we go.
Cool. I'll make dir, we'll call it Razor. That was funny. That. CD into it. And just to show you how I got started with this, I literally did .NET New Razor Components. And this is part of our, it's one of our templates in our 3.0 payload.
Yeah.
So you download the 3.0 bits, you'll actually have this now. So
okay.
This is good. You can definitely get started with this. And as you'll see, the structure, you've got an app folder and a server folder. And the server project will actually reference, do I have it right? No, it's the other way around.
The client references the server?
Yeah, this client references the server because that's the way things work in the world. No, it's actually the other way around. This project, I think, pulls in the app. Is that the way it was? There it is, yeah. So the server project literally pulls in that app project, and you would do most of your work in there. So, yeah, it's kind of cool. But if you're interested in the new Razor Component stuff, you can definitely take a peek at that. Now, what I will show you here, and this is one of my favorite new things about the Razor Component world, if I open my guy here, you'll see that I'm actually running message pack on this hub protocol. Now, under the covers, the reason I love SignalR so much is we've actually started using it under the covers with some of this stuff. So Razor Components and Blazor will actually make pretty good use of SignalR to do that transmission back and forth from the server to the client. So you
get even more real time while you've got stuff running natively in the browser.
Exactly.
Okay.
Blazor. And the other day I went over to Dan Roth and I said, when I do a view source on this, go ahead and do that right here.
Not a lot of source.
There's not a lot of source. View page source. There's a little bit more in Dan's view source window because he's got more updated preview bits than I've got. But this should show you what's going on. I mean, it's basically, things are happening on the server and we're pulling it down. And then if you would take a look at the actual source code here. Now, if you think about doing this in JavaScript, like I'm going to take this and just say, one of our favorite hosts here, Richard, think about having to do all that in JavaScript.
Sure.
You have to make a web API call. You have to get back the string. You have to render the string. It's probably not going to look the same. Or you just do it in Razor Components. And if I were to go in here to my app and look in my shared folder and just kind of look at is it in there? Main layout? Did I put it in there or did I put it in my actual pages? I think I put it in my actual pages. If I were looking here, look here. This is all, I'm basically just doing .NET code.
Hang on, let me hide us there so that we can see your screen down at the bottom half there. There we go. Now we can see it.
I can actually zoom in a little bit. So you'll see up here, here's our Razor components. This is just my normal Razor HTML code. Right here, I'm iterating through the list of font names that I get back. And right here, we're literally calling out to an ASP to a service written in .NET Core, not a web API, just a service class that I have. And, we just call Figgle service get font names, and this guy's going to work. And we actually inject it right up here. But, we could talk about Razor components all day, which I think this is a great opportunity for you to, bring it up.
Yeah, we are going to talk about it all day because we have a Blazor workshop at DEVintersection in Orlando. where we're going to talk about things like, Blazor components and getting real native code working with WASM, right? The WebAssembly in the browser, right? Having compiled code running in the browser is a very cool thing to do.
And this stuff's all open source, so you can deploy it, right? This is not like the old days where you need a quote go live license or anything. Like
That's
if
exactly
that's something
right.
you wanted to use it.
That's exactly right. And it's actually good that you mentioned that. What you'll see right here, you can probably see on my screen that I'm actually running Figulator and I was running Streamer at AzureWebsites.net, which is on Azure App Service. But there's something that I'm hoping one of you guys actually asked me a question here to kind of tee this up. But this is a preview SDK, and I've actually published it to a place that doesn't necessarily have that preview stuff on it.
Oh, where?
Well, the way I did that is we've actually got. I'll walk through it real quick. So if I were to basically take one of these sites, I'll go out to the sample streamer. So I've already got that in a fork. Okay, so what I would do here is I would literally just say, I'll do a quick demo. I would literally just create a new web app here, and we would call it streamer sample. And I could put this guy, I'll put it here, and I would leave that alone. I go ahead and use Windows because I want to use like the PASS implementation of app service. I don't necessarily need to do a container. So what I would do here is I would just go ahead and hit create. What that's going to do in the fabric is kind of go out and it's going to create a new app service for me, and that app service won't have anything in it. It'll take a couple seconds. So we'll do the cooking show thing here.
Yeah, I was going to say, Azure demos on my stream fail all the time, every time.
It's like the rule.
It's the rule, man.
This one will fail.
We call it the Fritz effect.
It is.
So this one's going to fail at first. Okay, that much I can say.
Okay.
I'm actually going to find an article here. Publish, say.
While you're finding that, I'm going to tell you that
60% of the time it works every time.
But sometimes it's even less.
So what I want to do here is I'm going to pull up this article that we have. I'll just drop it in right here. So we have a great doc article out here on how to get preview running. So if you look out here in our wonderful docs at MS.com, we've actually got a couple of different hosting articles specific to hosting ASP.NET Core, and we definitely talk about hosting on Azure App Service. So this is the doc that we currently have out on how you would install the site extension, which gives you the preview stuff and whatever. And it looks daunting. It's really not that bad. But I started thinking about it, and I was kind of wondering if I could do this with Azure DevOps, because Azure DevOps gives us a great way to kind of get started with CI/CD in front, which I don't know if anybody does that kind of thing, but I'm kind of a big fan of Donovan Brown's philosophy that DevOps, you put DevOps first. I definitely agree with that. So what I'll do here is my web app's already created. I'll just hit go to resource, and I'll click browse.
Yeah, you got an extra G in that name.
I do have that. That's weird. That was a typo. Sorry, everybody. So you'll see that my app service is up and running. So we've already partied and everything is working, but I don't have any code deployed to it yet. So I could go out and configure everything. I could just right-click publish if I want to, but I want to wire it up with CI/CD right out of the gate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down in here and look for the deployment center. I'll show you a great new feature. So we have this new thing called Azure DevOps Pipelines. What it does is it gives me the ability to kind of start with any of these sources. A lot of these sources existed before Azure DevOps Pipeline, such as GitHub. But I've got my stuff out in GitHub, so I'll go ahead and click continue here. And of course that's going to happen because I've done this and I've created something. Dang it, you were right, Jeff. I've created this in a resource group that I don't have access to do this one thing. So that's my
because
fault.
I'm here.
You're here.
Fritz effect.
It is the Fritz effect in effect.
I'll call it This Won't Break, and I'll put it in one that actually have more God rights. I'll call this guy.
You can do it.
Shut up. This won't break. And we'll have everything right this time. I'll put my name in. Brady G. This won't break. I'll leave that alone. So I'll go ahead and create again.
What'd you do?
You bother me with this. I swear. like you're amazing at breaking something that I've never broken. So
I can't describe why this
Mad
happens.
skills.
So weird. So what basically just happened was I am not an admin in the subscription that I created that app.
Oh,
And what
okay.
needs to happen is Azure needs to set up effectively an AAD application to do the association between me and my Azure DevOps account. And since I don't have, the required rights in that particular subscription, I had to switch subscriptions and go to one that does.
Gotcha.
So we're back where we need to be. I'll hit go to resource, go back to deployment center, go to GitHub here. Once it gets my organization, click continue. And this time we'll be okay. So there we go. So in this case, I'm in my Azure pipelines, and I'm gonna go ahead and click Azure pipelines. And then this step is kind of where it's gonna say, I want you to specify where your GitHub repository is. I
Let
know
folks
that
be able to see that. Go ahead.
Okay. Oh, am I doing something wrong?
No. You were coming down into a section of the screen where our video was overlaying.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
No, that's how low it goes on the screen. We got to show it.
Oh, okay. So I've got a couple of other, obviously David Fowler has some opinions about this code. So what I'll do is I'm going to select the master branch because I've actually there. David, I'll go ahead and say this about David. He has so many great opinions about code. And I think I've told Jeff this on a couple of different occasions. Getting a code review of David is like such a great thing. You feel like you've gone to college for like, a year in CS. It's really helpful. So I'm going to put this in my streamer guy here, and it should let me, and of course I want to do ASP.NET Core. So I want to go ahead and click continue. And effectively what this is saying is I want you to take what's in this GitHub repository. I want you to create a new pipeline. And that pipeline should basically live inside of this Azure DevOps organization, which I'll go ahead and open up here. So if I open up the Azure DevOps guy here is my project. And you'll see that I already have a pipeline because I've already done this, but we've only got one. And I'm actually going to go ahead and delete this guy. I'll delete this pipeline and I'll call it, give it the name here. And I've already done this. I didn't want to go through the process of creating. I've got to delete the build first, the release first.
Got to reset the demo.
This is going well.
I'm sorry. Got to reset the demo.
It's all Fritz.
It's all me. It's the Fritz effect. It just look. You wouldn't see this if we didn't
Do it live,
and we do.
I know, it's crazy. Like I did this. I did this last night in prep, and we didn't have any problem. There we go. So now we don't have any pipelines. Nothing up my sleeve.
I was going to say, if Azure was really giving us this much trouble, we're going to have to call.
Yeah, exactly. And you can see here if I want to do enable deployment slot, which I don't. I'm just going to go ahead and live on the edge because I'm with you.
Yeah.
It's going to be fine. It's all going to be fine.
It's going to work. It's going to work. Please work.
Well,
don't make me press this Wilhelm scream button because I've got it ready.
I love it. You're going to have to press it because this isn't going to work. And Richard, do you want to guess why?
No.
You don't? Jeff, do you want to guess why?
It's because you're not. It doesn't have .NET 3 deployed yet. Then you're trying to use .NET 3.
Right.
Yeah.
So .NET.
I didn't think of that.
That's a great point. So .NET 3 is not
.NET Core 3.
Excuse me. .NET Core 3. .NET 3 better be .NET Framework. .NET Core 3 Preview 4 is not running on app service yet. They're working hard on it. We just had a meeting with them about it. They're in the process of figuring out what we're going to have to deploy and configure and wire up all kinds of stuff for it. But the good thing is you don't have to wait. You can actually try the preview stuff out today. So this guy has actually gone ahead, and here's my pipeline. You can see that the pipeline's already worked.
Yeah.
If I wanted to, I could click on build pipeline right here. And we should see that pipeline has probably already started running. So if I click on this,
yeah, it blew up.
So I'm going to show you
how to fix it.
I'm going to show you how to fix it. And I'm going to show you how to get your stuff running on Azure App Service today. Make it so. Okay, so what I'll do first is I'll click Edit, and you'll see our build pipeline. Okay, so here's our build pipeline. And since I can't ever remember, I'm sorry, I'll zoom in a little bit more. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say .NET list SDKs. And you'll see that I'm actually running a preview that's a little bit more aggressive than the ones you probably want to run. I'm running preview 4. I'm just going to copy that guy out. Now, what I need to do here is I need to tell Azure DevOps I'm running a preview SDK. Therefore, I need you to install that preview SDK on this image before you try to build anything.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I'll click Add right here, and there it is. .NET Core SDK installer. I'll click Add, and it puts it at the bottom, but I can very easily, thank you, UI gods. I'll put this here, and I'll just say, I'll give this a name I like, preview, .NET Core SDK 3, preview 4, and now I can literally go right here, paste in that. And then what I would want to do, go ahead, push the button.
Which one? Which one? I've got so many.
The and then button.
Well, sure, we'll do the end ends.
And then?
There you go.
And then?
So I've gone ahead. You better keep your finger on the button. So what I've done here is I've gone ahead and set the version.
Yeah.
And then?
And I need to go into publish.
And then?
I need to add a couple of things. So the first one is going to be R. I'll
And
zoom in a
then?
little bit here. When is it x64? Is that right?
Either WinX64 or Win10-X64.
I think it's Win-x64 is what I want. And then I would do self-contained.
And then?
And then I would literally save it.
And then?
Go right here. And then I'm pretty much done. But there's one thing I want to notice. Oh, God. Okay, it's that bad. It's that bad. Okay, so what I want to show you real quickly is that I did a tweak on it, and I sent myself a PR, and you can see right here that I'm actually running this guy, this ASP.NET Core hosting model out of process.
Wait.
Wait, master. It might be dangerous.
Is it? Is it dangerous to run out of process?
It's typically dangerous to run out of process. Okay, now what we're doing here is we're running on top of app service. Now, app service, they have this really cool thing called ANCM, the ASP.NET Core module. Now, that module is how we're able to run ASP.NET Core inside of IIS on app service. But we have this awesome thing called Kestrel. And if I were to mark this as out of process, we basically just say, well, I don't want you to run it in IIS because I know if you try to, you're going to break because you don't have the latest version of ANCM that supports v3.
Gotcha.
Right.
Okay. So does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. So I've already made mine out of process. So at this point, I can literally go up here and I can hit queue. And I want to queue this build.
And
This
then?
build has been queued. And then we wait.
While we're waiting.
Shame. Shame. Shame.
Come on. We know it's going to run. Of course it's going to run.
Yeah, now that you've shamed it.
Absolutely. You've got to shame it into working for you, Richard. Otherwise, the Fritz effect comes in. And
Yeah.
Throw me a frickin' bone here.
please work.
You got it. It'll work.
Everything's fine, Jeff. I don't know what you're worried about.
I know. I'm watching all the and thens go by the chat room.
And then?
Exactly. So I had a friend made the and then emote for my channel. So now
Love it.
whenever I start that, they start filling up my channel and then.
That is fantastic. I need to get one of those in.
Janescu has a really great idea. We need a shamer signal our app
There you go.
so that
We can do this.
yeah,
Shame R.
shame
And it would be,
R.
would it be spelled, or would it be
Oh no, I think we need the E so that it's shame. Yeah.
Shamar?
Mar.
Yeah, or we could spell it like Shane does, SHAYMR.
Exactly. Have you seen? We've
Look at
already
that! It built successfully.
It built successfully, and
Now-
now it's publishing.
Hang on. What's great about this is while we've been here giggling and making fun of each other, it actually installed the SDK in 16 seconds.
Wow.
Why can't I install the
amazing.
SDK on my machine in 16 seconds? So
Isn't that cool?
That's
that is
amazing, actually.
okay. So
This
you're
is,
I love the
so,
workflow.
so this, see, this is important because everybody's like, if you read the docs, I mean, the doc is great. I got to give some bones to our documenters. They take a impossible thing and make it look possible.
Mhm.
But this is point and click. I didn't do any coding. And see, now my build is done and we're totally green. And if I go over here to my releases and I take a look at this release, we should see that release will kick off in just a minute. Let's hope that's not where it breaks. So this guy we've built here. There we go. It's releasing. If I were to click this release, we're pushing. So we've built our app, and now we're actually releasing that application out to Azure. We're actually pushing it right out to Azure App Service. And since we're running out of proc, Kestrel will do the work for us, and the ANCM guy won't mess anything up.
So, and you're packaging up and you're shipping the .NET framework, the .NET Core framework with you. You're doing that self-contained application with ASP.NET Core, so you get the whole enchilada onto a system that wasn't designed and didn't have that available to start.
That's correct. Now, the other thing I would say here is if you're ever concerned about App Service will automatically upgrade, like whenever we do like an ASP.NET Core update release, like we go to 2.2 to 2.2.1 or 2.2.4 or whatever. Whenever we do a patch release, App Service will automatically update everybody.
Okay.
So if you're concerned about that for whatever reason, you can actually stick your version using the technique that I just showed. So if you're in 2.2.100, you want to make sure you stay in 2.2.100 and you don't want anybody upgrading you, you can do that. Now, what I would say there is the nice thing about getting auto upgraded is if we find a security problem for whatever reason, the auto upgrade means you don't have to worry about that security stuff. That's one of the great benefits of cloud is we found a security problem, we fix it for you, you don't worry about it. If you stick your version, you stuck your version. So something to think about. You won't get that rolling update.
But I mean, you're always concerned about, is this update going to break anything?
Correct.
I mean, that unless right.
Right. And not here we go. So we're already done. We're totally deployed. Let's see if it worked. So I've gone over here. This guy has pushed. If I were to go here and click browse.
Now they're suggesting you need a sticker application as well. Actually, there's a sticker to give out at build. Hey, look, it's running.
And it really is running.
Hang on, wait. We got it running. We got to celebrate that. Look at that.
Ooh.
This won't break.azurewebsites.net. Yeah. All right.
So during this last part of this show that Jeff was late for, my bad, because Billy was talking about feedback again. By the way, Billy, your talk was fantastic, very inspiring. I walked in right when you started talking smack about me and all my brethren, but I'll forgive you.
Brady, we can make the Microsoft folks better, okay?
Exactly right. With real time. So you can kind of see what we were able to do here, all using DevOps pipelines, all using our build. I didn't have to go into any documentation. I literally just showed you how to do this. All you would do in your build agent, it's like your standard build agent. If you have a GitHub repository, you're like halfway there already. The only thing you need to do, again, is to add that all-important pair of steps up at the very top. And Hanselman has a really great blog post about this back in the 2.2 era when he upgraded one of his sites. He actually went through this process. I actually gone through it as well. But then the publish is also important because you need to do that self-contained, because what that'll do is that'll package up your 3.0 stuff and just drop it out there. So if you want to party on 3.0 and you want to party on 3.0 in a manner that you can actually show people and not just show them on localhost, you don't have to be afraid. You can totally do that today. And we would love for you to do it because if you party on the preview, the next preview is going to be better. So because we do listen to your feedback.
Oh, there it was.
Nice.
Oh, man.
I had to do it.
Very cool stuff. Thank you so much, Brady, for sharing.
No problem.
Let's see if this works.
Problem.
Hey, look at that. We went right back to the right screen.
Nice.
Very cool. And this is right. You have a talk about SignalR at the Orlando show, at the Orlando Dev Intersection show, and you're also doing a presentation with Glenn Condren on microservices, right?
Yes, we are. We're going to be doing a session together on microservices where we literally just like take your .NET Core applications, use things like Helm and Draft and, whatever, and push them out to Kubernetes. So we're going to show you how you can actually get your .NET applications running inside of Kubernetes. One other thing to call out is I'll probably want to show you how you can take your .NET Core applications and actually party inside of App Service, because App Service can support containers now. Mm-hmm. So you can actually run, your containers out there as well. One thing that Glenn has actually PM'd and done a great job at And we've got a couple tweets out about it, and I believe it's already committed to the repository as well. Is that Glenn has designed a worker template, and the worker template effectively gives you the ability. Go ahead and do this for you. So I'll CD in the source here, and I'll just make a quick dir. Jeff is late. CD Jeff is late, and what I'll do here is I'll just say .NET new worker, and I'll leave that alone.
Richard, can you believe this? Can you believe what I'm getting from this guy?
Come on.
There's a lot of flags.
So what I'll show you here is I'll go ahead and do code dot to open up one of my favorite editors, VS Code. And I'm in dark mode, so I apologize. What I'll do here is actually show you what this looks like. So you get a background worker, which is effectively a background service class. And, he goes ahead and wires up execute async and shows you how you could get started writing. This is effectively just a background service, almost like a .NET Core Windows service or a microservice that would run. And then it gives you the quick little startup inside of Program CS. And one thing that we'll talk about in our microservices talk at DEVintersections is the concept of health checks, which we added in the ASP.NET Core pipeline recently, that gives you the ability to do things like readiness checks and health checks inside of a Kubernetes environment. So Kubernetes will consistently ping your site or ping URLs that you give it to make sure that your database is online or your web API service is running so that your worker can talk to it. And those kinds of things we've actually implemented in .NET Core as health checks. So we'll talk a little bit about that in there. And I'm sure Glenn will talk a lot about the worker template and then the other stuff that we're doing around gRPC. We've got a gRPC template coming. We'll talk about that as well. And
hang on, acronym overload, gRPC?
Google RPC, is that right?
I think it's something like that, yeah.
Something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a HTTP2 thing. So I'm just learning from Saurabh and Glenn why I need to care about gRPC. You should. It's very fast. It's really good for using within a microservice environment. So if you have this service and this service and you want to talk to each other very fast, it's nice if you can put gRPC inside of it, because then you're going to have really fast communication. And there's a lot of other things you can do with gRPC. I'm definitely showing that I know very little about what I'm talking about here. But that's the pitch that Glenn's made to me. He goes, well, what if you want really fast throughput inside of your cluster? So there's
cool.
that. And some people have asked things like, are you ever thinking about putting SignalR on top of gRPC or on top of HTTP2? I am. I keep hearing that that's going to be a daunting effort. But I love the idea of SignalR as an abstraction. That's what made me fall in love with it 7 years ago, is that, I can program against SignalR, and whenever somebody releases the next WebSockets, we just add support for it, and I can continue to write against SignalR. Obviously, one day I would like to have, those layers underneath SignalR as well. And somebody else has mentioned WebRTC to me recently. You know, those kinds of things. Yeah, those kinds of things are very important to us. So keep that feedback coming. Keep us informed if you have other protocols or other transports that you want to add underneath SignalR, because we want to make it as ubiquitous as it's been for the last couple of years. So.
Fantastic.
Cool.
Very cool, Brady. Thanks so much for joining us. This was
problem.
great.
Thanks for inviting
me. I loved seeing the deployment and getting a brand new, a preview version of a not yet released .NET and ASP.NET Core, .NET Core, ASP.NET Core running out on Azure. And that's something that I think folks need to understand is possible. Whether it's Azure or somebody else's cloud, you can just get that working wherever you need to.
You sure can. You sure can. Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
Yep.
Thanks so much, Brady. We'll say goodbye. And
excellent.
All righty, and there he goes. We'll cut Mr. Brady. And there we go. So, Richard, wow, that flew by. That was a fast 2 hours.
2 hours. Yeah, no kidding. And we got the MVP Summit coming up, too. Are you coming out for that?
I am. So I'll be...
You got to hop on an airplane.
Yeah, some of us can't drive to it, all right?
There are some certain benefits.
There are. So
probably not a 737 MAX 8. I'm just guessing.
No, I fly American Air, so it's going to be a It's going to be a Airbus, probably a 321 that I'm flying out. Yeah,
better than an MD-80. I'm picking all the worst airplanes.
You are, or an MD-10. So.
Yeah. Are those still attached?
Oh my gosh, no, I don't think they're a thing anymore. I think they're gone. But I have a horse show that I'm announcing tomorrow. That's a thing.
MC, huh?
Yes, for some reason they like this voice. I don't know.
Oh yeah. You know, I got in that same situation with the younger daughter in curling. I have MC'd a bunch of like curling end of year events.
Oh, that'd be very cool. All right.
I have a whole collection of curling jokes now just because of that.
Really?
It's not a useful skill, not at all.
No. Well, I bet in the States it doesn't work out too well.
No, nobody knows what I'm talking about. But in Canada, I think it's hilarious.
See that, folks? We've got an international show here, right?
Yeah, we cover it all.
So, I fly out Saturday night, and then Sunday morning, I'm going to do my stream from. I got to figure out. I was just going to do it from my hotel room because when you do the time adjustment, it's 7 a.m. Pacific time. But I said something this morning about the new on my stream about the new command line tools that are available for .NET Core, and Kathleen Dollard heard, and she's like, "Let me help you with that on your Sunday stream." I'm like, "Oh, wait a sec."
Should you go to the studio since you're out there?
But it's a Sunday, so I might have to pull some strings and.
And those Channel 9 studios have extra locks, right? Like it's going to be tricky to get in there.
So I'll have to check and see if I still have my security.
Buzz Ms. G, because Ms. G can help you.
Yes. So if I still have access, maybe I sneak in there.
Yeah. Good call. And the studio is always nice. It's a great place to work.
Oh yeah. So we've got another one of these. We're not doing one next week. We've got MVP Summit, but 2 weeks out, the 29th.
Yes.
We haven't talked about guests for that one yet.
No, we haven't really talked about that. And I'd love if the folks that are listening in or are in the stream, if there's somebody you really want to see, go to devintersection.com, look at the lineup there. Happy to get anybody out that you want to have participate, whether they're doing workshops or sessions. We're all keen on doing that. I'm just putting the finishing touches on sort of a conference within a conference for what we're calling Angular Mix. So big focus on Angular, and I will have the illustrious Brad Green coming to the conference. So he leads the Angular team for Google. Stephen Fluen will be there as well. And so we're looking to get some insight into where Angular's going as part of the show, along with, of course, all the Scotts, the Hanselmans, the Guthries, the Hunters.
Yeah.
You can triple Scott for that one.
I think Scott Addy might even be there, so we might get to 4 Scotts.
4 Scotts. That's beyond the reasonable threshold of Scott, I think.
Yeah, I need to get the Doc Brown Great Scott line to play here.
There's a good one. And the VP in charge of AI, Eric Boyd, and a serious group of AI folks, including our friend Seth Juarez, who turns out is actually an AI guy.
Who knew?
Like the Channel 9 thing was kind of a sideline. I mean, he's got a degree in everything. Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, they're putting together an amazing lineup on deep learning and all of the new technology coming in the AI space for Microsoft. So that'll be part of the show as well.
Very cool. Very cool. I've got 2 workshops that I'm hosting. I'm doing the pre-con and post-con.
Yeah, I love it. And then you're sticking around the weekend, right? Like we're doing the rocket thing together.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The rocket thing.
We're gonna do the rocket thing. I want to do a little rocket time.
Absolutely.
It's good to get into Kennedy and just walking around and remind yourself what's going on there.
There's something when you visit Kennedy Space Center that when you see the size of these rockets, these vehicles that not just Americans, but that humankind built.
Yeah.
The scope of that. It's daunting. It's so impressive to see and realize they built this without a Pentium processor.
Well, there is a full Apollo stack lying there.
Yeah.
And there's also Atlantis, the shuttle. And it's interesting to, having grown up in the shuttle era, to now see shuttle as a museum piece and realize like it's never going to fly again. And it's very interesting to see what they talk about and what they don't talk about in that museum area.
Oh, really?
Well, just for example, there are 2 Canadarms. There's the arm and the extension on Atlantis.
Okay.
And they talk about the arm, but they don't talk about the extension because, of course, the extension was added after the Columbia incidents, after they lost Columbia. So they were able to put a camera and inspect the bottom side of shuttle and be able to make sure there was no significant tile damage. And they don't talk about that in the museum. And I can see why.
Sure.
It's not a great thing. But for me, as someone who knows exactly why that arm is there, to see that and realize, like, some years from now, maybe that'll be lost. People won't know.
Maybe we just need to do an hour here just talking about space stuff.
Well, I could do stuff on shuttle for a long time. That's what kicked off the .NET Rocks Geek Outs in the first place, man.
Yeah.
It's I've actually made notes of all of the very close calls that the shuttles had that didn't result in losses like Challenger and Columbia.
Really?
They lost a tile on, I think it was 51F. They lost a tile on the belly, and it was a military mission, so the communications were very restricted. And the only reason they did not lose that shuttle is that where the tile came off happened to have a steel mounting bracket for an antenna. And so the mounting bracket melted, but didn't allow a burn through. And that's the only reason they kept that shuttle.
Wow.
If it had been almost any other location on the belly, it would have burned through, and we would have had another Columbia incident, or we would have an incident like Columbia before Columbia.
Wow. All right.
Yeah, there was a number of very close calls for the shuttle. That's not the only one. There's a few. It was a machine before its time in a lot of respects.
Certainly.
And so if we're bombing around, when you and I go to Kennedy together after the show, I'm going to go on and on and on until you tell me.
Shut up. Shut up.
Great feedback. Thanks for that. Yeah. Great feedback.
I think that's a show for us for here. We're putting together, we still have to work on a little bit of strategy where we're going to put these videos afterwards. We do have the recording from our first one with our first 3 guests. And we do have the recording from this. Twitch has been recording the whole time. And we're going to make these available somewhere. We're going to have a DEVintersection TV available to folks. This will be available, of course, on Twitch for the next 2 weeks. And then, we're gonna figure out a good place to land these, because I think there's some valuable discussion in here that folks would like to be able to catch up on.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, thanks so much, Richard. This has been a lot of fun. And
always a pleasure, my friend. We'll do it again sometime soon.
Yeah, let's do it again in about 2 weeks.
That sounds like a great idea. I like that.
All righty. Take care, everybody. We'll see you.